And welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Joining me, as always, on our Tuesday podcasts now, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, at AH Malcolm on Twitter. And of course, he is the sage of Red State now, redstate.com, where he has his VIP column. And I stole that one from Larry Elder. I got to admit, Andrew, that one I stole from Larry.
Whatever. As long as it's not the rascal of Red State, that's fine.
Ooh.
Don't get any ideas, Morrissey.
How about the regent of Red State? You're the Prince of Twitter. You're the regent of Red State.
There we go.
There you go. Okay, so we've got this all figured out.
The ruling regent.
The ruling regent of Red State. I don't think I could say that 5 times fast. The Prince of Twitter, the ruling regent of Red State. I can work with this.
Never mind. Prince is good enough. Thanks.
Well, I mean, you could be called other things. I mean, Joe Biden just got done calling Peter Doocy something at the press spray with the open mic, the unfortunate open mic. I won't play it here, but basically, if you haven't already seen this, folks, you can find it. You can find it on Twitter and at the New York Post and lots of other fine places. Peter Doocy asked Joe Biden a question from the spray, which generally speaking, presidents don't respond to anyway. And Joe Biden's mic was on. Apparently nobody in the White House thought to turn it off, and you can hear him call Peter Doocy a stupid son of a bitch while he's sitting there. And that's not a good look for President Healer, right?
Yeah, right. The great uniter. Yeah, and who wants the media to tell his story better? Right.
Also, the same guy who said that anybody who doesn't treat people with respect in this administration would get fired. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a long history of open mic gaffes. I remember Joe Biden when Obama was signing the Affordable Health Care Act, and he said, "This is a big effing deal." As he was hugging Obama. And then Bush called Adam Clymer, a New York Times political reporter, on an open mic, a certain portion of the anatomy. And there's been a lot of those gaffes. I don't know how they can forget that everything they say. Even Clinton going down a rope line. Remember, he got caught? And Obama going down talking about those stupid people in Pennsylvania with the gun-loving.
Yeah, the bitter clingers. They were bitterly clinging to
bitter clingers, right? Yeah. And he ended up losing. He won Pennsylvania in the fall, but he ended up losing Pennsylvania primary to Ms. Clinton.
Yes, to Hillary. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is hardly Joe Biden's biggest problem. I just think it's kind of an amusing look at the crankiness of Joe Biden, something that, I mean, honestly, he's been this way his entire life. This isn't age. This is the same guy who used to like to get pugilistic when people contradicted him on campaign stops. I mean, this happened in either 2019 or early 2020 at a car manufacturing facility. He got into an argument with somebody about the Second Amendment and looked like he was ready to square off on the guy. An old clip from 1987 from his first presidential campaign. He actually explicitly told the guy, "Hey, let's step outside and discuss this sort of thing." That's Joe Biden.
Presidential material. He's under a lot of pressure. He's taken a lot of gas. He's trying to pretend he didn't. I wrote about this in the column. I know we'll talk about. And what I said in the column was that he reminded me of my grandfather, who had hardening of the arteries. And 1 second, he was a nice old man whittling on the porch. And the next second, he was a junkyard Doberman from the Bronx. And it can switch the circuits just like that. And I guess sometimes if you're a politician, you want people to be afraid of you. But if you're president of the United States, commander in chief, I think you want people to respect you more than fear you.
Well, I think domestically, anyway. Maybe you want some of America's opponents to fear you. That doesn't seem to be working out too well either,
Well,
though.
no, and uh, that's one of the strong points that Trump had in his foreign policy was that they weren't quite sure about him. And unlike any other modern president, he did get the North Korean leader to meet a couple of times and to pause his testing, which is now resumed now that Joe's back in. A hypersonic missile he fired that goes 10 times the speed of sound.
Yep.
10 times the speed of sound. I don't think with what there is today that you can knock that sucker down.
Nope. No, I don't think so either. Getting back to your column here, I found this amusing because it's a great column. If you're at redstate.com, you should check this out. It's a VIP column, like most of Andrew's submissions over there, because it's worth the paywall to get to this. And you talk about how it doesn't look like Joe Biden can course correct at this point in time, and Republicans are really crossing their fingers that he can't. Chuck
Ready
Todd,
to pounce.
yeah, well, there's a lot of pouncing that's going to go on in the media, especially. But I mean, Chuck Todd, I don't want to say even Chuck Todd, but I mean, Chuck Todd was talking about this yesterday on Meet the Press and looking at the polls and saying, this is shellacking territory. We're in shellacking territory at this point in time, and it doesn't look like Joe Biden is doing much to deflect. That was the whole point of last week's press conference, right? Was to reset the presidency. And in your column, you assess the success of the reset somewhat along the lines of New Coke.
New Coke. It was not very successful. And he showed his crankiness. He showed his tried to be folksy. And that was one of the things that I think has dawned on people and explains his job approval plunge, is that he's garrulous and he talks a lot, which, there's no crime in that. But you realize after a while that he's talking to fill up the space, because I think he's afraid somebody's going to call him out, and they're going to find out that there's really nothing there. All politicians will overtalk sometimes to fill up space because they don't want another question. Joe does this no matter what. And there was a story Politico had recently about why he's always running late. His first meetings of the day start on time. And then he's late for the second meeting and he feels guilty because he came late. And so he stays to talk with people, which makes him later for all the meetings down the hallway and the other meetings that follow and other meetings that follow. Remember at the NATO meeting last summer, he was 2 hours late, 2 hours for a news conference.
Yep.
I think 20 minutes is standard Biden time now, but I mean, that's just rude. I worked, as some of our listeners know, I worked for the first Bush presidential campaign, and I traveled a lot with Laura Bush. And both Bushes had a rule: you could never be late. How can you ask for someone's vote and make them wait to hear you ask? I was with Mrs. Bush in Council Bluffs one time. We arrived, the Secret Service brought us up to the door for the event 5 minutes early. And she said, no, they won't be ready and they'll be embarrassed. So we drove around several blocks until we were 15 seconds before the set time, according to her watch. And we came back to the front door and pulled up exactly on time. And I pointed this out to some of the reporters, and they told me that Bill Bradley had been there at an event the previous night, and he was over 2 hours late.
Wow.
And expected people to wait in the cold. So, I guess you can look at his success, which he didn't have.
Right. Right. And I mean, I think that this goes beyond just the normal annoyances of tardy presidents, though. I mean, I think what you're seeing here, in fact, I know what you're seeing here is a collapse in confidence in Biden. I mean, you're looking. I mean, you take a look at the numbers at all of these polls. It doesn't matter where they're at now or where they come from now. They're all bad. It's just where in the trend you're at in each of these cycles. The Associated Press had a piece today, and I think this feeds into what you're talking about in your column, that says, according to their latest release, and this was a poll from I think Thursday or Friday of last week. Biden's only got a 60% or so job approval rating among black voters. Now, a Democrat should have 90% job approval. That is a solid demographic. That is a block voting demographic. That doesn't mean that 40% are going to vote for Republicans, but it does mean that you're losing a lot of enthusiasm among a demographic that you absolutely have to be able to turn out in the upcoming midterms. And so there, the sense is that they're wondering whether or not Biden's losing black voters. Not that he's losing them to the GOP, but he's certainly not keeping them engaged.
Well, if you're not in favor of Joe Biden, you can't be black.
Yeah, well, yeah, that should have been the first hint, right? I mean, that really should have been the first hint. But this is, I think, and I think to a certain extent, the issues that you're talking about here are a failure to set expectations properly and a failure to stick with a formula that won for him in 2020, which was a centrist formula. I'm going to focus on stuff we can do together. I'm going to focus on unity. I can talk across the aisle. And I mean, it took about a nanosecond after the inauguration for him to just completely go to the hard left and take the progressive agenda and run with it. And, with the exception of the infrastructure bill, he hasn't even tried to engage Republicans, other than to say they won't vote for my stuff, even though I'm telling them that they should. I mean, that's...
Well, they're obviously they're all racist.
Right.
Bull Connor and all the others. I'm not sure if he bought the progressive rhetoric and agenda, or if he just fell into it, or if he even knew what he was doing mentally. But he has nowhere near the legislative clout he needs to drive that agenda. Nowhere near. 5 House votes. That's three votes change, and he's loses the House.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unbelievable that he, as a guy who's allegedly a savvy politician, I guess Delaware doesn't elect many savvy people, but as a savvy politician, that he can't tell after 36 years in the Senate and 8 in the now 9 in the White House, that he can't tell that slim margin, he doesn't even have a majority in the Senate, doesn't entitle him. It's not a mandate. And so, you need to look beyond this afternoon as president, and he's not. And we saw that in the Afghanistan withdrawal. No, don't get them all out. And the general said, no, you need 2,500 for an evacuation. Nope, get them all out. Now he's ordering Americans out of Ukraine, but they're on their own.
Let's talk about Ukraine. I mean, that's another topic. I mean, certainly it's something that, foreign policy is a big deal here. A big effing deal, to quote our...
Big effing deal, yeah.
It's a big effing deal.
The DNC did T-shirts of that to try to cover their tracks. A big effing deal when Biden said that on national TV.
Again, I mean, you can almost say that there might be some charm in that is sort of being authentic.
Uncle Joe, yeah.
Yeah, sort of being Uncle Joe. There's no charm in saying it depends on whether Russia conducts a minor incursion into Ukraine as to what it is that we're going to do. I mean, this is very serious territory.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
and you mentioned that they're yanking people out of Ukraine, and Ukraine's pretty unhappy about that. The EU is saying it's not necessary. I mean, the EU's foreign, I guess you call it foreign minister or minister of foreign policy, I think is what they call it at the EU, Josep Borrell, was asked by the press on Monday morning. So the U.S. is pulling a lot of its personnel and families out of Ukraine. When does the EU do this? He says, I don't know why they would be doing that. They haven't explained that to us, but we're not pulling anybody out of there. There's no need to pull people out of Ukraine. And I am convinced that the White House got embarrassed by that minor incursion talk that Joe Biden was using and now want to act tough and this is part of an overreaction to try to show that the White House is on top of things. I mean, it's really the only explanation that you've got.
As he overreacts to criticism in the press conferences, to challenges by questions, and as you point out, Ed, it's a serious business. You know, in the late 40s, during the Truman administration, the American Secretary of State said something to Congress that appeared to indicate that South Korea was outside the United States sphere of interest.
Yep.
Now, remember, Korea was all Japanese until the end from 1905 until the end of World War II. And then it was divided at the end of the war. And so he appeared to indicate that South Korea was outside the sphere. And that prompted Kim Jong-un's grandfather, the founder of North Korea, to launch the Korean War, thinking that the U.S. didn't really care. And for a few months, it looked like he was going to win it. But then General MacArthur took over and took care of business. But these words have serious implications.
Right. And it doesn't seem as though the White House is thinking strategically at all. I mean, it just seems that they're reactive to this. If you're looking strategically about our position in Kiev, then you don't pull personnel out of there, especially since it's sort of, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. The reason why they pulled personnel out of Kabul is because the Taliban, I mean, they knew the Taliban was going to attack them, right? They would seize them, they would create hostages, it'd be 1979 all over again, right?
Right.
But I mean, let's just say, for instance, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but let's just say Vladimir Putin orders a full-out invasion of Ukraine and tries to invest Kiev, right? Which is, by the way, not anywhere near the lines that the Russians are at, where the ground troops are at anyway. They're at least a couple hundred miles from the Russian front to the, to the east, and Belarus is to the north. But in order to march on Kiev from Belarus, you'd have to go through Chernobyl. Now, I don't know, maybe they'll do that, but that seems to me to be an unlikely invasion point. But even if they go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No.
I was going to say, even if they did do that, Andrew, there's nothing to say that that embassy personnel from any country would be particularly at risk. The Russians aren't looking to start a war with the United States by attacking the embassy or anybody else's embassy.
Exactly. Over the weekend, the British intelligence and Ukrainians leaked the information. They had a memo or a paper indicating that Putin was going to try to have a coup in Ukraine. Now, you may think that's unlikely, but everything is up for sale in that part of the world.
Right.
And that would save him an invasion. You say, oh, well, Ukrainians have risen up and overthrown Zelensky. So what can I do but help them out? They're our neighbor nation. And that would save him a lot of trouble. So it's not just invasion that we're talking about. It's subterfuge, subversion, I mean.
Right. But at any rate, in none of those cases would there be a particular risk to American diplomatic personnel or their
No,
families.
no, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And that's the reason why, Joseph Borrell was telling reporters on Monday morning, I don't have any explanation for why the U.S. is doing this. I mean, they're clearly not coordinating this with the EU.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all reaction, no strategy, all tactics, no strategy. And I think Putin's taken the measure of that and is acting accordingly.
Well, it's strange because Biden was the one who said that he was going to work so closely with allies.
Right.
And when he pulled out of Afghanistan, he didn't tell anybody. He didn't even tell the host country. It's just all of a sudden at midnight, all the Americans are gone. The lights went out, and the sacking of the air base began.
Yep. In Bagram, yeah. Bagram, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so here you've got the foreign policy president, right? Because this is supposed to have always been Joe Biden's, top portfolio was foreign policy. And I think we understand now why Robert Gates had such a low opinion of Joe Biden's foreign policy chops.
Yeah, absolutely. And the quote from his book was that Joe Biden has been wrong about almost every single major foreign policy issue for 40 years. And Gates is no partisan. As you know, he worked for both Democrat and Republican presidents. And his book, if you ever want to read his memoir, is fascinating. It's fascinating. And one of the things he also pointed out about Biden was Biden's distrust of the military, that Biden was always whispering to Obama, you can't trust the Pentagon, you can't trust them. So that might help explain why Biden doesn't remember the name of the Secretary of Defense, and why when generals said, no, sir, you need to keep 2,500 troops in for an evacuation, Biden said no. I mean, how can you, somebody who wasn't in the service, and I don't know, how can you tell the generals, well, no, I don't think so, because he's so blindly focused on ending the war by getting every single American troop out.
Yep.
And then he had to send back in 3 times as many for the evacuation, and lost 13 of them into a suicide bomber and a couple hundred Afghans.
Yep.
And still, as you pointed out in the show a couple of weeks ago, 14,000 Americans still left there, and 60,000 Afghan allies and their family, many of whom are being hunted down one by one by the Taliban at the moment, although Biden calls them the Taliban.
The Taliban. Yeah, that was an Obama thing, the Taliban. All right, let's shift our attention to the world of media, Andrew, and Sarah Palin is well, she was supposed to begin a court case, a defamation case about the New York Times on Monday, but she ended up testing positive for COVID, so they've kicked it out 10 days. Now, this is relating to a 2017 editorial in which the New York Times said that it was, I forget exactly how they put it, but basically blamed her for the Jared Loughner shooting of Gabrielle Giffords and the deaths of 6 people in Tucson in 2011, even though that hypothesis had been thoroughly debunked by news media outlets everywhere, including the New York Times, in the 6 years in between those 2 points. She's suing them for defamation. The New York Times, I mean, David Folkenflik actually had a pretty good piece on this, saying the problem is that the New York Times was dead wrong, and they're going to have a tough time explaining how they got this so wrong when their own newspaper reported that theory was bunk.
Yeah, and she'd have to show, or her lawyers would have to show, that it was irresponsible. And the Times itself reporting that it wasn't true would seem to fit right in, where in those days it was, or was it? I'm not sure when they moved into their new building, but when I worked for them, the editorial department was on the 10th floor and the news department was on the 3rd floor. And so you ascended to the opinion people on the elevator. They should have had the same sort of attention to detail and truth. Now they did correct it, and so they're claiming that that makes everything okay. But so I think she has a case, and if she wins, then that will shake the roots of the media, especially if she wins against the old gray lady.
Yeah, according to the Sullivan decision, you have to, if you're a public figure, you have to show what's called actual malice, which means that she has to demonstrate that it was reckless disregard or knowingly printing something
Right.
that was false, which is a higher level of proof demand than there is for private individuals who sue for defamation. I think she's also including libel, so I think it's both libel and defamation. The I think that.
Well,
not reading your own reporting, right?
I'm not. I guess you don't want to have juries. Juries should scare the media.
I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you say to a regular person, the New York Times printed that it wasn't her fault, and the editorial department of the New York Times said it was. To me, that appears rather reckless.
Well, not only that, but let's remember the context of this editorial too, which I had actually kind of forgotten until I dug back into it this morning to do the what I thought was going to be a curtain raiser on the trial, and it turned out that the trial had to be postponed. The editorial in question was written the day after the guy shot several the Bernie Sanders supporters shot several Republican congressmen at the baseball field.
Right.
And this is a guy who explicitly was looking for Republicans to shoot. He was out there looking for Republican congressmen. He was a Bernie Sanders reporter. Or Bernie Sanders, not reporter. He's a Bernie Sanders supporter. He's a nutcase. I mean, I don't want to, that doesn't tar Bernie Sanders. But the point was that was a politically motivated attack. It was explicitly politically motivated. The guy wasn't a nutcase he wasn't a paranoid schizophrenic in the way that Jared Loughner was, and Jared Loughner didn't have any political motivations. He was just sort of fixated on Giffords as a person. Tragically, I mean, there 6 other people died in that shooting, including a federal judge that was somebody that one of my family members worked with. So, I mean, it was utterly tragic, but it didn't have anything to do with Sarah Palin. And the purpose of doing this, and this is something that's already kind of come up in the deposition, which I think is going to be a little difficult to talk around, is the purpose of doing that was to sort of to present a balance by saying, well, yeah, one side's nuts, but so's the other side. And so they deliberately mischaracterized what happened in 2011 as a way to play off the fact of the political motivation of the 2017 attack. I mean, to me, that's purposeful. That's not just recklessly negligent.
That's malice. It's malice to me.
Yeah. If I'm a juror, I'm looking at that and saying, well, it certainly seems malicious.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting, and it'll get a lot of attention because of her.
Yep.
I always found her to be fascinating. I must say, I know a lot of people don't like her, but anybody that can overthrow the Republican political machine in Alaska, I covered it back in the 70s. That's like overthrowing the Chicago Democratic machine. The Republican machine in Alaska was entrenched.
Yep.
And as a brand new rookie politician newcomer, she got riled up and overthrew Murkowski, the father of the current senator. Which the machine's power remains because you may remember the last time Murkowski got elected, it was on a write-in. So think about that. You win a statewide election with write-in. You're not even on the ballot. So I don't know how they misspelled Murkowski, but I'll bet they counted them.
I'll bet you they did. All right, well, we're almost out of time, Andrew, on this podcast edition, but there's always time for the jokes of the week.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, they've been on vacation, these late night comics. So
what?
Yeah, so I've come back. Well, like Joe Biden. So I've come back with Um, I've got some replay. I call them replays. They're Conan replays. A new study says kids have bad health effects from eating too much pizza. The study used a pie chart, which the children immediately tried to eat. Let's see. Another Conan one is that today is the first day of the Chinese New Year of the Dragon. So Happy New Year. Or as they say in China, everybody back to work. And let's see, remember back in the 2012 primary campaign for Republicans, Conan said, Mitt Romney is releasing his 2010 and 2011 tax returns. Not to be outdone, Newt Gingrich is releasing his 1988, 1994, and 2005 wedding vows. Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. Ouch. Yeah. So one other one, another Conan one. He said the NHL champion Boston Bruins visited the White House today as champions. President Obama said he loves hockey as much as any black guy who grew up in Indonesia. I just love that one.
Total politician, though. I mean, you gotta respect the political.
He was a White Sox fan, so he didn't go for the Cubs. I'll give him that.
Well, there's only so many lines you can cross before you just lose all credibility, right? But he did know how to draw those.
If sometime you go to YouTube and look up Obama throwing the first pitch.
Oh, the mom jeans.
That's a joke.
The mom jeans thing?
The mom jeans, but the awkward. It's just...
I'd laugh, but I've told you the story about throwing out the first pitch, right? My story about throwing out the first pitch?
No.
Well, we've got a couple...
First?
We've got a minute or two. So when I was living in... I was working, I was doing the Northern Alliance, and the St. Paul Saints... wanted to have somebody go over and throw the first pitch out from AM 1280 the Patriot. So they asked me to do it. And I said, I haven't thrown a baseball correctly since I was a teenager. I got a case of the yips someplace, and I never could figure out again how to throw the baseball properly. They said, well, all you got to do is just go out there and lob it. And I was thinking, yeah, that's going to look great. So I actually practiced on this for like 2 weeks. I got myself one of those nets, and I was trying to correct my throw, and I just never could get it. So I went to the ballpark, and I was just petrified as to how this was going to turn out. And we show up to the ballpark, and this massive thunderstorm breaks out. They have to cancel the game, and I never had to go back and do it. So it was. I had practiced for 2 or 3. I think I still have the mitt and the baseballs. I got myself a mitt. I got myself some baseballs. I was trying. I think I still have them around someplace.
You should have that thunder sound effects when we're doing the thunder lightning round.
I guess so. All right.
Oh, that's a good story.
Well, on that note, Andrew Malcolm, the Prince of Twitter, the ruling regent of RedState.com. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you again next week, sir.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.